The Monster Study: How Doctors Tortured Kids in the Name of Medicine. Before we start, hit that subscribe button and like this video to help us grow. The Monster Study, conducted in 1939, is one of the most notorious examples of unethical experimentation in psychological research. This study, led by Dr. Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa, sought to explore the origins of stuttering by deliberately inducing speech problems in orphaned children. The experiment has become a significant case study in discussions about research ethics and the protection of human subjects. Dr. Wendell Johnson, a prominent speech pathologist, was interested in understanding whether stuttering could be caused or exacerbated by external factors, particularly by negative reinforcement. To investigate this, he designed an experiment that would test the hypothesis that speech fluency could be influenced by how children were treated during speech assessments. The study involved 22 orphaned children from the Iowa Soldiers' Orphans Home. They were divided into two groups. The control group. This group received normal speech therapy and were given positive reinforcement and praise for their speech. The experimental group. This group was subjected to negative reinforcement. They were intentionally criticized and belittled for their speech, and were told that they had speech problems or were at risk of developing a speech impediment. The aim was to determine if the negative reinforcement would lead to the development or exacerbation of stuttering. The results of the Monster Study were disturbing. The children in the experimental group who received negative reinforcement began to exhibit increased speech problems, which in some cases led to stuttering. The study demonstrated that negative feedback could potentially induce speech disorders. However, the ethical implications of the study overshadowed its scientific findings. The ethical violations of the Monster Study include lack of informed consent. The children, who were minors and living in an orphanage, did not provide informed consent. Their guardians were not fully informed of the nature of the experiment or the potential risks involved. Psychological harm. The negative reinforcement used in the study caused significant psychological distress and harm to the children. Some developed severe speech disorders or experienced long-lasting emotional effects. Deception and manipulation. The study involved deception and manipulation of the children. The children were led to believe that their speech was inherently flawed, which could have damaged their self-esteem and emotional well-being. Lack of debriefing and follow-up. There was no follow-up to address the psychological impact on the children after the experiment. The study did not include measures to mitigate or address the harm caused. Many of the children in the experimental group, who were subjected to harsh criticism and negative feedback, experienced an increase in speech problems. Some developed or exacerbated stuttering, which persisted beyond the duration of the study. The negative reinforcement applied during the experiment is believed to have contributed to these long-term speech issues. Persistent stuttering. For some participants, the stuttering continued into adulthood. The psychological trauma inflicted during the study likely played a role in the persistence of these speech disorders. Research into the long-term effects of negative reinforcement suggests that early exposure to criticism can have lasting impacts on speech fluency. Speech anxiety. Increased anxiety about speaking may have also developed in some participants. The experience of being harshly judged and ridiculed could have contributed to a fear of speaking, which in turn may have exacerbated their speech difficulties. The psychological impact of the Monster Study on its participants extended beyond speech disorders. The study's use of negative reinforcement and manipulation left deep emotional scars. Self-esteem issues. The negative feedback and criticism experienced by the children likely affected their self-esteem. Many participants may have internalized the criticism they received, leading to long-term issues with self-confidence and self-worth. Emotional distress. The stress and anxiety caused by the study's methods could have led to ongoing emotional distress. Some participants may have struggled with feelings of inadequacy, depression, or anxiety as a result of their treatment during the experiment. Trust issues. The deceptive nature of the study, in which children were misled about their speech abilities, may have led to long-term trust issues. Participants might have had difficulty trusting others or authority figures due to their experiences in the study. The monster study was kept largely confidential until the 1990s, when it was brought to public attention by researchers and journalists. The exposure of the study led to widespread condemnation of the ethical standards in psychological research at the time. The monster study remains a stark reminder of the importance of ethics in psychological research. While it contributed valuable insights into the impact of negative reinforcement on speech disorders, the ethical breaches and harm inflicted on participants have overshadowed its scientific contributions. The legacy of the study underscores the need for rigorous ethical standards to protect the rights and well-being of research participants, ensuring that such violations are not repeated in future research.